Hello, listeners. Hi, my name is Madhavi, and I'm so happy to have you on UppTalk. You have come to the right place if you want to learn about IT and do really cool things with your hands. We are not just another IT company when I say UppTalk. Think of us as your learning partner dedicated to helping you reach your full potential. We have top notch hands on courses to help you build your business, whether you are new to technology or want to move up in your current job. Let's look around this as our first step towards learning.
We'll go ahead and continue enhancing, modifying this report. We were at the point of working on the report filters. Could continue with that. Yesterday, we saw how we could improve our report filters and let users decide what values to input. Right. And this is true not just for example, the hire date fields that we added. Any other fields can be prompted to the user, or we can define a filter which is a combination of letting users enter some values while other values could be static. Whereas still other values could be dynamic, right? At this point in time, for example, I can go back and let's say add my gender field and let that be a fixed value saying gender in the selection list or not in the selection list and enter some value. My filters can be a combination of anything, right? It could be a combination of some fixed values that I have defaulted within the filter, plus some values being prompted to the users, plus some values being dynamically determined using value from another field, comparison type. Or I can also prompt multiple options to the users. At this point in time, I can also go back and prompt the gender as well to the user. And once again, based on whatever app selection I have selected as part of my filter criteria, my report would always work. Right. Gender is also getting prompted to the user. Now, if you remember when we looked at our work-based standard reports yesterday, right? Let me open a duplicate tab. We looked at work-based standard reports yesterday. Let me go ahead and open that report once again. If you remember, we were able to run this report when we wanted all reports in all of our reports. All report categories, there were two options that we had. Either I could select all of these report categories, right? I could select all of them. And there are some 225 odd report categories and then run it, which would then return me all standard reports in the tenant. Right. The other option was I could simply leave the selection blank. I could simply leave the selection blank. And still it would return me all reports across all report categories. Let's see what happens when we leave our selection blank. If I select some value, then we know that it returns data. For example, I'm selecting for June 1st, 21. June 31. When I run this report, with certain selection, it does get me data for that selection. Right. Let's see what happens if I run it blank. When I run this report without entering any input, it doesn't get me the full set of records, unlike this report. In fact, it gives me 0 records. Now, the reason for that is the report filters and the prompt selection that we have selected, that we have included. I go to the filter once again. The comparison type that I'm using is prompt the user for value, which means every time this report is run, the report would check what value the user has entered in these prompts. When I don't enter any value, system is basically trying to get all employees whose gender is blank and who were hired on the blank date. Because every employee would have some hire date, that is a required field for hiring a workers. That means no employees were hired with a blank date. And that's why it doesn't get me any data. Whatever input I give on the report, selection report is trying to get data based on that input. Which means even if I don't give any input, I leave the prompt blank. It is trying to fetch data for those blank values. Now that is fine for gender because some employees would have blank gender, right? But that wouldn't be the case for hire date. Every employee has a hire date. We cannot. If you would have seen this in your last week's class, for hiring a worker or a contractor, a date field or a hire date field is required. Now, how do we handle this? For this, and how do we make sure our report behaves in a manner as this report? But for that, I have a fourth option. And let's modify our report and see what that option is. Fourth option that we have is under comment. We only have 3 options and we have looked at all 3 of these. I'll go back and look at all. There's a fourth option and the option says prompt the user for the value. Right. However, ignore the filter condition if the value is back. Basically, if the user doesn't enter any value, then ignore the filter condition. Then the report behaves as if this filter condition doesn't exist, or the hire date at the hire date as well. I'll select the same option. Basically, if the user doesn't enter any values for these prompts, and then the report behaves as if these 2 filter conditions or whatever, wherever I select this option, those filters do not exist. This filter doesn't exist. Obviously, then report will get me data for all employees hired in any date. Once again, I'll go back to comparison value and make sure my values are not unique. And now when I run this report, if I leave these two blank because that's what I have selected and then run it, it should give us all possible combinations, say basically all the requests of gender. We still selected from the user for value, right? For gender, oh, that should be blank. Apart from that, we would get everything. For gender, it is still expecting some value. I'll enter some value for gender. Now it is getting me all employees even if I have not entered hire date. If you see it's getting me all employees across those two genders, irrespective of when they were hired, because the report simply ignores this. Filter conditions based on what I based on the filter criteria specified. Had I selected the same option for gender as well, and again what they would have given me everything if I have left gender blank. If I entered some value, then this particular filter would be considered. If I don't enter any value as the end user, then the filter condition will be ignored. And the report would behave as if this filter doesn't exist. The report would then only work on this filter. Right. Or maybe I only enter this value, then the report will get me all records which whose hire date is less than that date. Or if I just enter this value, then report will get me all records whose hire date is greater than this date. Right. The report would only consider if a value has been entered or prompted. If not, it will ignore it. Right. And that's exactly what is happening with this report. If you don't enter any values, then the report completely ignores this filter criteria called report categories and get me all standard reports across all report categories. If I select something, only then it is considered. Only then this particular filter is considered. Let us go ahead and let me do one thing. Till now, we have been dealing with one data source, all active and terminated workers. What I'll do is, and we saw this yesterday, at any point in time, if I think the data source is not the right data source, or I can still optimize my selection in terms of the data source, the filter, I can always go and change my data source. I could select an index data source at any point in time. This identifies a standard data source, this icon. Whereas if I scroll down these icons, the bold symbol, they identify that these are all index data sources, but these data sources are all from the same business object. Now, Workday doesn't allow me to select a different data source or select a data source which will change the business object. My business object is now fixed. I want to select a different data source. And this is what I'm selecting workers by organization. This is again a standard one. Let's run this. If you see, all I've done is I have selected a different data source, and we know what is a data source. It is a filter, right? An additional filter which makes sure that I only get the relevant records. That's what all active and terminated workers are doing. But now when I change my selection of the data source, if you see, I have some additional filters added or some additional prompts added. Earlier we didn't have. The organizations include managers and include subordinate organizations. Where are these prompts coming from? These prompts are coming directly from the data source. Some data sources have built-in prompts. And if you look at the data source, it is saying workers by active organization. This data source, what it does is based on the organization I select, it will only get me workers for that organization. Some data sources, they come with built-in prompts. Now, how can I know that if I go to the data source description? The data source also tells me what prompts those data sources come with. If you see, it says this data source comes with 3 built-in prompts. Right? And it gives me the report description as well. If you go through the report description, it talks about what these prompts do. Before selecting any data source, just ensure that you select what you want. Now these are built-in prompts, which means I cannot go ahead and delete them. Right. In fact, if you see, one of these prompts is required. Now, what do these prompts do? As I mentioned, they would get you data based on the organization that you select. All right. The first prompt is organization. I want to get data, let's say, for all GMS companies. I want to get data based on company. Right. And then there are quite a few companies. I want to get data. All right, I could have done any other selection. Right? I can select any organization. Right. I'm selecting a few companies here. I could have selected supervisory, or I could have selected cost center. I could have selected anything. This data source and its associated prompts. They allow me to specific one or multiple organizations and then specify whether I want to get data only for that organization or its subordinates as well. I can select one or multiple companies. And I can or cost centers or any other organization type. And it lists me all the organizations, both standard as well as the custom organizations that I have created. I'm selecting a few GS companies once again. All right, I can say get me data only for those organizations, but also its subordinate organizations. And then I can go ahead and run my report. As I mentioned, because these are built in prompts, I would not be able to delete them. In fact, one of these prompts, if you see, is a required prompt. If I leave this blank, they would give me an error saying that the value is blank and you cannot get data. Based on the combination that I have selected, a system is getting me data. Now, how to handle these prompts? The prompts cannot be deleted, right? But you can manage them, you can handle them. If I edit the report once again, I'm going to this tab called prompts, right? And there's this checkbox called populate undefined prompt defaults. When I select this checkbox, system shows me all the prompts. Now these include both those prompts that I have added as part of my filter criteria. Gender, high date, but it also shows me all the built-in prompts. Now there are different options I have here. I can manage these prompts in the sense I can order them. I want maybe gender to come on top and I can move gender to the top. I can reorder them, right. The second option is I can specify some default value. Every time I'm running this report, if you see I or any user runs this report, they have to enter gender manually. We want the users to have some selection. What I'll do is I'll come in here and I'll say specify default value. Let's say male and female. Similarly, because when we run the report without any gender, it doesn't give us any data, right? Which means gender is actually a required field. I'll also mark it as required that users know that this is required, right? And they don't run it without any input. With respect to organizations, this was a built-in prompt, right? And if you see, this is already marked as required. Because this is built in prompt, I'll not be able to make it optional, right? As I said, we'll not even be able to delete it. But again, just like our standard, our custom filters, I can add any defaults here as well. I'm saying specify default value and I'll select global services. I've randomly selected a few companies. For others as well, I want to include managers. Yes, I want to include managers. I'm saying specify default value and the default value is either yes or no, right? A checkbox means yes because this is Boolean, right? Do you want to include managers? It could be the yes or no. There are only two defaults here. Either I say yes or I leave it blank, which means no. Similarly, do I want to include subordinate organizations? Again, I'm saying yes. It's not necessary for me to specify defaults for everything. I can specify defaults for some values, while others I can leave them blank. Now these two prompts I don't want, or at least this one I don't want to be displayed to the end user. What I'll say is I'll say do not prompt at runtime. I have already entered the default, but I don't want the end users to be displayed when the report is run. I basically want to hide this. Let's run this report and see how the prompt layout changes now. Now I have those default prompts. This is marked as required. At this point in time, I can either run this report with what is defaulted or I still have the option to change the selection right. But because this is required, if I say system would say this is a required value. Defaults are there for gender. Defaults are there for organizations. Once again, I can run for these defaults, or maybe this time I want a different selection. I can still change them. I can remove some of these options. I can add options that include managers is no longer displayed because I've hidden it. I can enter the start date and end date now and then go ahead and run it. Or we know that these would be fetched irrespective of what data I enter. If I run it, I'm getting data based on my selection. Now, whatever values I enter as part of prompts, they are all displayed here. All organizations I selected males, it shows me the selection here. If I don't want that, I can also hide these. Let's say for organizations, because we have selected a lot of organizations, we don't want this space to be used and I want to not show this. Again, we can go ahead and do that. Under prompts, I can select this checkbox, do not include in subtitle. For organizations, at least I do not want to include it in the report output. If I do not want to include any of these prompt filters in the subtitles, then I can uncheck this box or I can select explicitly here one by one. But I want to display gender and others in the subtitle. It's just organizations that I do not want to display. With respect to the hide date as well, again I can specify a default value. This again I can specify. The default option is no default, just like everywhere else. I can say specify default value and I can enter a static date. When I do that, this is stuck. Not sure why. I've said specify default value, and I can specify a default value here. Once again, let's say I want the date to be dynamic. If I say for ending prompt, if I say specify default value and select a default value of today, then that becomes a static prompt, which means if we run this report any date right in the future as well, this will be 1.1/2022, and this will always be 29 November. We don't want this to happen, right? Let's say we want this end date to be dynamically populated based on the date this report is being run. If C, there's a third option as well. We have three options: no default value, specify default value, and determine default value at runtime. Once again, I'm saying it instead of specify default value, I'm saying determine default value at runtime. And similar to what we did earlier with filters, I'm saying today. This way, whenever we run this report, system would check what is the today's date, and this date would be defaulted to that date. Let's see how the report output looks. Here we set a static date of 1.1/2022, which is what we get. Here we selected today. Now, as per the Workday 10 end date, I think the server is for US, and there it is still 28th. Today's date is defaulted to November 28th, 2022. Right? Whenever we run this report, today would automatically, or the ending hire date would automatically default to that date. All right. Now, what I want is I want the starting hire date to be, let's say, today minus 6 months. If I'm running this report today, my ending hire date would be 1.128, which is today, and my starting hire date, let's say, should be today minus 1 month or 2 months or any other thing. For that, once again, I can go ahead and modify my report, and I can build something called a calculated fields. We have spoken about calculated fields a bit, right? We can create calculated fields for our specific requirement. Similar to how we selected for the ending hire date, wherein we set determine default value at runtime and specified a dynamic field. I can come in here and say determine default value at runtime and then select a specific dynamic field. Now Workday, this is a Workday delivered field today, but for others, for let's say today minus 1 month Workday has not given us any field. For that, we create something called calculated fields. There are some calculated fields already created. I'll add that and show you how they look. But we'll also talk about calculated fields and we'll see how those calculated fields can be created. For now, I'll simply go ahead and add one of the available calculated fields. Why do you create a calculated field when there's no Workday delivered field for that specific requirement? Workday has delivered us this field called today, and that's why we are using it. But for other specific calculations, Workday has not given us any fields. For those kind of requirements, we can create calculated fields. I don't know why this is taking this long. This is a Workday delivered field, right? But for other specific requirements, Workday has not given us any field, right? If I search for today, you'll see that there are quite a few calculated fields that we have created. We'll use one of those for now, but then later we'll see how we create calculated fields for our requirement. Thank you. Hopefully this should be sorted out. Alright, if I search for today, oh no, you see that there are a number of fields available today, plus 1 day today, plus 2 days, 6 months on, and forth. Now, these are all the calculus. For now, I'll not show you how these calculus have been created. I'll simply go ahead and use them in the report. And then later, once we start, if you see, this is a calculated field. I'll show you how we can dynamically specify prompts. I'm selecting this one today minus 6 months. And we'll talk about calculus after we have looked at prompts. On this now, This is today, and here system is automatically taking today minus 6 months, which is May of 28th, and it is getting me the output. Right. We can dynamically specify these calculus value. Any questions till now? Perfect. This would be a good time. Alright, let's also talk about sharing the report, and then we'll look at our call field functions. At this point in time, if I go to the Share tab, this report is only available to me because I created the user, and when I say I mean Loga McNeil. She's defaulted as the report owner, and she has not shared this report with anyone. Anyone else, if they search for this report, they'll not be able to find it. What I can do is I can go ahead and now share this report with the right users or the right security groups. I'll go to Share tab. Instead of saying do not share this report definition, which is what is defaulted, I can say share this report with all users and groups. Right. This report is now available and is accessible to all the authorized users. Or instead of sharing this report with all users and groups, I can share it with specific users and groups. Let's say I want this report to be available only to managers. I can go in search for that security group. Again, people have created. This is a test tenant, simply ignore. The idea is I can go in and share this report with specific groups, specific security groups. Managers, HR administrators, HR partners, COM partners, or any relevant security groups. I can come in here, select one or more security groups, and share this report with them. I want this also be available to comp admins. Let's say I also want to share this with HR partners, and on and forth. In addition to sharing this report with security groups, let's say there's some specific user I want to share this report with. I can do that. I want this report to be available, let's say also to Betty. Once done, those users can search for this report and access this report. Alright? Till now, we have been dealing with standard fields. When I say standard, the Workday Deliver fields. Now I want to add some calculated fields to this report. Now calculated fields. Workday has given us a number of functions. When I say function, you can think of a function. You can think of a function like an Excel formula, right? You want to add a couple of values, you select the relevant formula. Just like Workday has given us a number of formulas, Workday has also given us a number of functions, and then we can use those functions to dynamically generate some data. Data which is not data for which fields are not Workday delivered. Let's state and there are functions across different categories. Just like Excel, wherein we have date formulas, we have text formulas, substring, concatenate text. We have a number of other formulas as well. Similarly, in Workday as well, you have different functions. Today minus 6 months, that was a date-related function. Similarly, there are text functions, there are arithmetic functions. I can add two values, I can divide values, I can multiply, and on and forth. And we'll look at some of these examples. Let's start with date functions. Here we have age. And this field gives me the worker's age based on their date of birth. I have a requirement. The requirement is this gives me the age as of today, right? When I say today, whenever I'm running this report. But I want the age of the employee as of when the employee was hired. Logomaniel, she was hired in 2000. Today she is, let's say, 50 years. In 2000, as of her hire date, she was probably 30 years. I have a requirement. And I want to understand, let's say, at what age I am hiring my workers. Now there's no delivered field for this. Because there's no delivered field, I'll have to create a calculated field. Right. Now there are two ways a calculated field can be created. Or there are two types of calculated fields. One is report-specific calculated field. When I create a report-specific calculated field, that call field is only available for that specific report in which I go and create it. If I create a tenant-wide calculated field, then that call field can be used by other reports as well. In both cases, we create calculated fields using the same method. Let's say I want to create a report, specific calculated field for this report. I would add a new field here. And I can come in and I can create a call field. I can create a call field for this report. Also create call field for the report. And it takes me to the screen. Instead of creating call field for the report, as I mentioned, I can also go in here to a new tab and access this task called Create Calculated Field. Now this creates a tenant-wide calculated field which would be accessible throughout the tenant. This creates a report-specific calculated field which is only available on this report. But everything else is exactly the same. Now, when creating a calculated field, you have to specify the business object. We discussed yesterday, what is a field? A field is an attribute of a business object. Age is an attribute of a worker similar to date of birth, last name, and on and forth. Age is a Workday delivered attribute. Now when or a Workday delivered field, when I'm creating a call field, I'm creating a new attribute. When I'm creating a new attribute, I'll have to specify for which object that attribute is being created for. When I say I want to know the age of the employee as of the date when he was hired, I'm saying I'm asking you to create a new attribute for an employee or a worker. My business, the worker. And if I open the business object details, this new call field would then be available on the business object. And that's why if you remember, when we opened the worker business object, there were some 15 Zalanzid fields. people have created all sorts of calculated fields, and that's why there are that many fields on that business object. These are all attributes of the business object, right? When I'm going to the task create call field, I'll have to explicitly specify the business object, which is worker. But when I create call field for the report, Workday automatically takes. Oh, let's just go to the Mac. However, if I go in here and create call field for the report, Workday automatically takes the business object from the context of my report because my report is based on the worker view. Workday defaults the view to worker. Everything else, as I mentioned, is exactly the same. It's just that we access a task here and we access it directly from the report. The method is same. The first thing is your PO. Then we specify the function. Function is your formula. The way you select a formula right in your Excel. Right. And there are different types of formulas available. Similarly in Workday as well. There are a number of data-related functions. I would search for date. And if you see there are a few data-related functions. Now, some of these functions are not relevant for us because they are used in composite reports or other report types. Not all functions we would be checking because we are not talking about those reports. Now, what is my requirement? My requirement is to get the age of the employee as of when they were hired. If I have an employee whose date of birth is 1/1/1990, this is their date of birth, and their hire date is, let's say, 1/1 and their hire date is 1/1/2000. Their hire date is or age when hired is basically this minus this. Right. When they were hired, they were 10 years old, which is basically I take the hire date and from it I subtract the date of birth. And that's exactly what we need is we want to find the difference between two dates. Select the function. And if you see, this is very self-explanatory. Just looking at the function, you get the idea of what that function does. I want to find the difference between two dates. I'm selecting the function date difference. Right. I'll give a name to my cal field. Now, usually for cal field, we follow a specific naming convention. This is a kind of best practice. But Workday itself doesn't enforce any naming convention. Workday wouldn't accept any name. But then, as a best practice, this is usually what we do. We select CF to identify it's a cal field, followed by the function, and the function is state difference. Followed by the business object, it is worker. Or followed by a short description of what we are doing. I want to get age when hired or age of the employee when hired. Right. The advantage is someone looks at the name, they would get some sense of what that cal field does. Looking at this name and without going into the details, if I'm someone new, I would get a sense. This is a date difference. Cal field on the worker business object which gets the age. Add some descriptive names that you don't. It would be helpful for you once you start working. Right. I'll say all right. Now, as I mentioned, Workday calculated fields are very easy. Because I selected the date difference, it gives me options to enter two dates, and Workday would automatically find me the difference between two dates. My starting date is hire date. And I want to find the difference of hire date. My ending date should be hire date. Your end date should be the bigger value, and my starting date would be date of birth. I want to subtract the date of birth of the employee from his hire date, his or her. Now I can find the difference between these two dates in terms of any of these options. I can say find the difference in terms of years or months or days or hours or minutes or seconds. Let's say I want to find the difference in terms of months. Now, whenever we are doing any arithmetic calculation, if this option is enabled or available, make sure you check it. What happens is, let's say for some employee, their date of birth is not available, their date of birth is missing. And we have seen there are lots of employees for whom date of birth is not entered. They were all test employees. If you don't select this option and Workday tries subtracting a blank because date of birth is missing from some date, it will give an error. Right. When you select this option, wherever Workday encounters an error, let's say you are subtracting some value from 0 or null, or it would not. Your report would not error out. Only for that field Workday would give 0 instead of throwing an error on your report output. Your report itself will not fail. It will simply, in that particular calculation for that employee, it will show you 0. Right. This is a kind of your exception handling tool, right? If you have worked in some programming languages like Java and on and forth, there's a concept called exception handling. What do you want to do if there is an exception? This is what allows you to take care of those exceptions. Again, a best practice. If this checkbox is available, and it will be enabled in available in most of the arithmetic plus minus related calculated fields. Wherever this checkbox is enabled, just go ahead and select it. And I want to find the difference between two dates. I've selected months for now, and we'll see how that works when I say it takes me back to my report and my call field is added. I'll run it. I would select a wider date. No employees hired in these GMS companies. Now it's giving me the difference between the hire date and the date of birth in terms of months. We'll do a couple of things, and this is what it gives me. We'll add the date of birth field as well. That way we'll know whether our calculation is working fine. And now I'll also make the changes and I'll say instead of getting me the difference in terms of months, give me the difference in terms of years. Right. Let's first edit our report and add the date of birth field. The second thing, if you see the column title that I see here now, this was fine for the calculated field, right? Wherein, as a technical name, this was fine, but for an end user who's running this report, this actually doesn't make sense. If I'm an HR partner, it doesn't make sense to me when I see this as my column title. For the end users, we want to show some meaningful names. What we'll also do is we'll change the label. I can go ahead and change label not just for my calc fields but also any of the fields. Here I want to override the column heading. Instead of the technical name, I want to name it as age on hire. Plus, I want to add a new field which is date of birth. Plus, I also want to update my calc field and say show me the difference. Not in terms of months, but in terms of years. When we update the calc field at any point in time, the calculation automatically updates in the report. You don't have to do anything extra for that. While I run this report, I would come in here, calc field for report. I want to edit it. Currently, once again, it's giving me the difference in terms of months. If I come back and say, give me the difference in terms of years. I'll go back and refresh this report. And this time it's getting me the difference in terms of months. The date of birth is 85. The employee was hired in 2011, which is 15 plus 11, which is 85, 90, 2015, which is 26 years. Right? As of now, the employee is 30 cents. But as of when the employee was hired, he was 26 years. Any question? We have created our first calc field, which was the date difference. We also looked at the calc field with respect to our prompt right. The hire minus 6 months. Now that is also a calc field. But the calc field type is increment or decrement date. If I go back to my prompts and look at the calc field function, this is what we had used. I want to create a new calculated field. I want to create a new calc field. Let's say today minus or give X days or X months or X years. I can go ahead and do that. This is a calc field. What I want to do is I want to create another calc field for report. Once again, my business object is defaulted. Now these kinds of calculated fields, for example, today minus 6 months, right? Now these kind of calc fields, they are relevant not just for our report. Usually they are applicable for all reports globally, right? Because these are date functions. If there is any calc field that you want to be available globally, then you usually create it on the business object global. Any calc field which is created on the global business object is available in any report irrespective of the business object type. For example, a number 52 as an example, right? Or any number for that matter. That number could be used in any report throughout the tenant irrespective of the report context. These kind of values are usually created on the global business object. Let me show you another example. Before I create this calc field for the report, let me build another calculated field. I want to create another calc field for my report, and then we'll come to prompt. Once again, the calc field is of type data. I want to create a new calc field for my report. I would search for the function date. And if you see, there are a number of other functions available. The function that I'm using is build date. Now build date as a function, as the name suggests, it allows me to build a date using day, month and year components. I am giving it a name CFBD or build date worker. And I'm calling it higher slash date of birth. What are the three components of a date? A date has a year, a date has a month, a date has a day. Right? Now for year, for any of these components, I can either specify a fixed value. For example, for year, I can say a fixed value of 1950 or 2099. Let's see if 299 is available. It is available. I, we see 2 to 53 is not available. Right? This number doesn't exist. What I'll do is I'll create a new calculated field. Now, because 253 is a number and I'm just taking some random values, right? And this number could be used in any report. I'll create a new calc field, but this time I'll create this calc field on the global business object that it is accessible next time. Similar to how someone would have created 2299. And if you see, this is a calculated field. The reason I'm able to access it is because it's available on the global business object. I want to create a new calc field. This time I'll create it here. Again, there's no difference. I could have simply gone in here and I've said I could have said create another calc field for the report. If you see, I am creating nested calculated fields for this calc field. I'm creating one more calc field. I can create it from here or I can create it from here. It doesn't matter. I'm creating it on global business object. Now, when we are creating these calc fields, there are three types of constants I can create. I can create number constant. 23299 is a numeric constant value. Or I can create a text constant, for example, A, B, C. Or I can also create a date constant. Right? I'm selecting numeric constant. Now for constant values, usually the name of the field is the same as the name of the value as well. For our date difference calc field that we created, we gave it a name CFDD, or even for this calc field, we are giving it this name. But when I'm searching for a CF number, constant and C, that doesn't make sense. Usually when we are creating these global, the name is same as the value. This is simply the name of the calc field. The actual value we specify here. Had I given it some weird name, then people would not have been able to search for it. Again, this is a good practice. Workday wouldn't stop you from giving any name. Now when I search for 2053, if you see, it's available. This is a calculated field of type numeric constant. The name is 2053 and the value is 253. Well, this is what is Workday referring. This is simply a name. That's it. For the year, I'm using some constant 2053 for building my date. For month, maybe I want to select us. I can again specify a static month, maybe November or 11th month or 12th month or whatever is available. But month I don't want it to be static. I want it to be dynamically determined. What I want to take, let's say, the hire date of the employee, and whatever month the employee's hire falls in, I want that month to be extracted. Workday would check the hire date of the employee, check the month of employee's hire, and that would go into this date. And again, I'm just building this random calculated field to show you the options available. For, let's say, day again, I want to extract it from the date of birth of the employee. An employee may have blank date of birth. Wherever this option is available, I'll go ahead and select it. I'll click. I have built a new date field wherein I have sourced the date components month, year and day from other fields in the tenant. Right? I'll open this in a new tab, and while we run this report, we'll see how this looks. I'm calling it hired/dub. All right, we said our year should be 2053, a static value. For every employee, the year is 2053. The month should be extracted from the employee's hire date. This employee was hired in January and the month is January. Let's see. This employee was hired in FEP. The month is FEP. A day should be from the date of birth. The date of birthday is 24th of June and here the day is 20. Here it's 14th of January 2053. I think let's do one more calfield and then we can take a 15-hour, 15-minute break. All right, the third calfield that we will look at is the today minus. Let's talk about that calfield now. Earlier, as part of our prompts, we used today minus 6 months and we want to see how that calfield was created. That calfield is of type increment or decrement date. In essence, if you see the logic behind that calfield, all we are doing is we are taking today's date and from that date we are subtracting 6 months. Right, that's all we are doing. We are taking a date, right, and we are either incrementing that date, in this case, we are decrementing it by 6 months. I could have incremented that date right or by a certain month, by a certain year, by a certain number of dates. I am creating a new calfield for my report. Once again, we'll see how nested calfields are built. I'll search for date. The function is increment or decrement date. Either we can increment or decrement, and I'm calling it not today, I'm calling it build date minus 20 years. Again, I'm taking some random value. We'll see how you can use nested calfields. Here, I could take today's date right and from it and to it maybe add 10 in years or subtract 10 years. Now, when we take a positive number, system add that number. If you see, the field says years to add or subtract. If I take 10, system would add 10 years to today. However, if I take minus 10, system would subtract 10 years. How is this negative number created? Again, through numeric constant. I can create a numeric constant and instead of saying plus 10, I can specify minus 10. Right, if we take a negative number, system subtracts. If we take a positive number, system adds. Similarly, I can say add 10 years and from that subtract 2 days. Right? I can use a combination of all these values or I can just say today minus x days the way we have created today minus 6 months. We simply took today and from that we subtracted 6 months from it. It all depends on what your requirement is, but that option is available. I do not know why it refreshed. If I open this, all that has been done is I can say today minus 6 months. They have taken today and from it in the months field, they have added minus 6. System subtracts 6 months from this date. Right. I'm creating a new calc field. This minus 20 years. I'm not taking Workday delivered field today, right? I want to show you how we can use nested calculated fields. I'm taking this calc field, the one that we created already. Obviously, I can also search for calc fields that we have created. I am saying take this calculated field, right? And from it I want to maybe subtract 20 years. If I take plus, it will add. If I take a minus number, it will subtract. Once again return 0 on error. You can build your calculated field functions as complex as you want. You can do any level of nesting. You can create one called field. For example, this is one calc will be created. We nested it within this calc field and this calc field. In turn, we are nesting it within this calc field. Right, we can do any level of nesting that we want. Let's see. Let's see. And if you see, these are all very simple functions. The name of the function itself gives us what that function does. And based on what we are selecting, Workday would automatically give you the right fields. All right. This is what has happened. If you see, we are our build date function that we have created. This is when that error happens. We have created this build date function. Right. And what does this function say? It basically says, create this date for a worker wherein the year is a constant of 2 to 3. The month. You have to take the month of the specific employee, hire date of the specific employee, and from that extract the month. When I'm using this calc field inside my today, this calc field, right, and using it as a prompt system is trying to display you the default prompt. But here, in order to subtract these 20 years from this build date system, first have to know the hire date. And now it is not calculating hire date for any worker at this point in time, right? Because we are simply clicking that. It shows you those prompt values at this point in time because Workday is not. Doesn't know any hire date of any employee or any date of birth of any employee. System is giving you that error. Right? What I'll do is I'll go ahead and use it within columns. At this point in time, when the report is actually running, that is when system should know. for each employee now at this point in time when the report starts running. It would know for a given employee what is that employee's hire date system would first create this calc field and use that calc field to then subtract 20 years. But at the point of generating, the prompt system still doesn't know. Or from the context, system cannot determine. Hire date or date of birth, and that's why you are getting this error. Now when I run it, it will run fine. Now, if you see, for each employee system has determined the hire date slash top, and because it has determined the hire date slash top, it then takes that date and from that date it subtracts 20 years. But at the point of generating, the prompts system doesn't know any of these values because none of the records are still loaded into the report context. And that's why that error system would go ahead and generate. Makes sense. Questions, doubts, queries. All right, we looked at a few. If you see, I'm not able to search for that report with this user because I created my reports as logamix fee, and obviously the reports are not shared with the specific user. I proxy as Logan fee again. We've looked at a few date-related calculate functions. Right now, let's talk about a few instance-related calculated field functions. I want to edit my report once again. This is not our report, right? This is for the evening batch. My report is this one. I want to edit my report once again. I'll go back to the all active data source filters. This basically gives us more workers, but this point in time system gives me not this one. It would give me a few errors when I try saving this. The errors are all related to prompts because these prompts they were associated with that previous data source that we selected, or the errors are with respect to these prompts because these prompts the organization. This prompt and this prompt, they were associated with that specific data source. Now that we have removed that data source, we'll also have to remove those prompts. But the other prompts which are associated with our filters, they are still valid. We don't have to remove them. The other prompts are still valid, but the data source related prompt, because the data source itself has been changed, they are no longer valid for us. I'm adding actually another filter. I'm going in here and I want to add another filter saying, let's say, all right, in Workday, before I talk about this, there is a concept called additional jobs when an employee is hired into a position. That position becomes the primary position of the employee, but then that employee could also be doing any additional jobs. For example, I'm hired in India. Let's say that's my primary position as a Workday consultant, but then I'm transferred to, let's say, UK for 1 year. That is my additional job, which means I'm associated with two positions. While a worker has only one-to-one relationship with a primary position, he or she can have multiple additional positions. There's a one-to-one relationship and then there's one-to-many relationship. What I'll do is, I'll first add those values here just to show you. When I search for position, this is a single instance field. If I go to the details, it says the worker's primary position. This is the position on which worker is hired. A worker will always have only one primary position, but then the worker can have multiple additional positions. I search for position once again, and if I scroll down, there are a few multi-instance fields. I think they are at the end. Let's see, there's this multi-instance field. And if I look at the description of the field, this is multi-instance and it contains all the positions, both primary as well as if the worker has any additional position, they would also be shown here. What if the worker doesn't have any additional positions? Then we'll only show the primary position. Now, not all workers have additional positions in our tenant. What I'll do is I'll add a new field to only get those workers who have some additional positions. One here. I'll put a filter saying all positions and jobs. I think there is specific or specific workday delivered field which is called additional job. Yes, this is again another call field which shows or not call field. Another field which shows only the additional job positions, right? I'm taking this one. I'm saying only get me those workers whose additional jobs is not empty. And I'll basically use the same one on my columns as well. While this contains only primary position, this contains both primary as well as additional positions. This field only has additional positions. Most of the times, if you see it's a question of you searching the right field. Most of the times, Workday has already provided us those fields. What I'll also do is I'll for now remove hire date. We don't need this anymore, right? We are not dealing with these anymore. I'll go ahead and remove them for now. Let's run this. Now, this should only give me those workers who have some additional job. It returns all additional jobs for the worker. Alright, now, if you see, this is how my report layout looks. This is the primary position for this worker, the program manager. This shows only the additional position. If you see, this worker is on an international assignment, which is shown by this IA symbol or this IA suffix. And in general, any additional position is shown by a plus sign. There are two types of additional positions. One is I can do an additional job on an international assignment in which Workday suffix is IA. Or I could be doing an additional job in my own country, right? Domestic assignment in which system doesn't show that IA, it simply shows plus. Right here I have the primary position, the additional jobs, and then this shows all positions. It could be primary, additional jobs, international assignments, everything. In this case, for example, this worker has 2 additional jobs. In all, there are 18 workers who have additional jobs. Now, this is what I want. Out of this field, a multi-instance field, right? And this field is giving me all additional jobs of the employee. They could be international assignment, they could be domestic assignment, on and forth. What I want is, I want to create a new field in which I only get the international assignments of the employee. Alright, I want to create a new field. For example, in this case, if you see, this worker has 2 additional jobs. Both of them are international. Can I search for some worker who has 1 international and 1 domestic? There's no such worker, but that's fine. What I want is, I want a separate field to show only the international assignment positions of the employee. Currently, this shows both international as well as domestic. Now, how do I do that? For that, I can create a calculated field. If you see, this is a field of type multiple instance. It has all instances of additional jobs of the employee, both international and non-international. I would want to create a new call field. I will open this in a new tab. creating a new call field. This call field is of type extract multi-instance. The reason for that is I'm creating a new calculated field for the report. We'll also run this report in a separate tab that we can see the data and compare it side by side. Now I'm creating a call field, and as I mentioned, the call field would be of type EMI, which is extract multiple instances. Out of this, additional jobs. I want to get those additional jobs which are related to an employee's international assignment. Now, if I look at this data, some employees can have multiple international assignments, which usually doesn't happen. But again, this is a test in it. If you see, I want to get one field in which I'm only getting the international assignments of the employee, and an employee can have multiple international assignments, at least as per the data in this tenant. Out of this multi-instance field, I want to get all those instances which are related to the international assignment of the employee. I want to extract multiple instances of employees' additional jobs which are associated with their IA. I'm calling it CFMI, which stands for Extract Multi-Instance Worker IA Jobs. When I'm doing that, I'll have to specify my source field. This is the field from which I'm getting my instances. What is my source field? It is additional jobs. I want to take all additional jobs of the employee and from that only select those additional jobs which are international. My source field is additional jobs. It is one more. I don't know what it does. Fine. I'm taking this multi-instance field. And from that, I'll only select those instances which match a specific condition. What condition is that? The condition, as per our requirement, is that job should be international assignment job. Let's see, there is an international assignment. There is a field available which is of type Boolean. Here we use Boolean fields because we want to check, is this position associated with an international assignment? If yes, this cal field would return true. If it returns true for a specific instance, then that data is returned. All right, now, let's run this report and then we'll do the comparison side by side. We can also create those Boolean fields and we'll see how that is done later. This worker has only one additional job and that additional job is international and that's why it gets pulled. Right? This worker has only one additional job, but that is not international, and therefore for this worker nothing is pulled. This is blank. Again, this worker has one additional job, not international. Nothing is pulled. Same is the case for this worker. Two additional jobs. None of them are international. Again blank. Right, let's scroll down. This worker has three additional jobs. All of them are international, and that's why all of them are pooled. Right, we created a calculated field saying get me all the instances of additional job of the employee which are related to international assignment. Right, we are getting multiple instances of data from this multi-instance field based on a specific condition. What is that condition? We have used a Workday delivered Boolean field for that, saying that is international assignment. The condition is this related to employee's international assignment? Let's also create now similar to extracting multiple instances. We can also extract single instance based on a specific condition. Now a worker can have multiple organizations. Right, what I'll do is I would remove these fields because question. I'll keep just these two. I'll remove everything else. Let me add another calculate or another field. Let's look at this field. It shows all organizations that the worker is assigned to. Now worker can be assigned to multiple organizations, right? They can be assigned to company cost center supervisory or the region location and on and forth. This is a multi-instance field which shows all organizations assigned to the worker's primary position. We'll first run it. We'll see the data and then we'll create one more calculate. This particular worker is assigned to three organizations. This is a company. Let's see if this is a company. Right, this is a company that the worker is assigned to. Similarly, I think this is the location that the worker is assigned to. Right, this is the region and there's some other organization. Again, this worker is assigned to three organizations on and forth. Now, out of all the organization assignments, again, this worker has some 4 assignments. Maybe I want to pull only a specific organization for the worker, may be a company, cost center, again out of multiple organizations that the worker is assigned to. I only want to pull a specific organization assignment, maybe a company, maybe a cost center, maybe a region. Now worker can only be assigned to one company. A worker's position can only be assigned to one cost center, at least in HCMM. Now I'm not creating a multi-instance. I need to create an extract single instance. When would I create an extract single instance? When I know or when I need only one instance out of the multiple instances associated with the worker. Let's go in and create one more calculator. Extract single instances, again very similar to extract multi-instances. The cal field that I'm creating is ESST. Extract single instance. Extract multiple instance will give you 0 to multiple records. For this worker, as an example, there's no record or no instance which matches the selection criteria. It gives me 0 records, or for this worker, there's just one instance that matches the criteria. It gives me one record, but for some of the other workers, it gives me more than one. EMI can give you 0 or 1 or many instances. ESI, on the other hand, will give you maximum of one instance. Alright, I'm saying ESI worker organization. Once again, the same logic. What is our source field? Our source field here is organization assignments. Out of all the organization assignments, I want to fetch a specific organization assignment. I'll come in here, I'll copy this text. My source field is organization assignments. Now, out of all the organization assignments, once again, I want to extract a single value, this time based on a specific condition. The condition last time was his international assignment. Here the condition is based on the type of field we want to extract. Let's see what conditions are available. If nothing is available, then we'll go ahead and create a new one. There are a lot of conditions already available. What we'll do is there are a lot of delivered Boolean fields. Plus, there are lots of calculated fields as well. Here once again, I'll create a new calculated field. What I'll do is, just to show you how this condition is created. Condition is a calculated field of type Boolean. Boolean either returns true or false based on whether the condition is true. I'll create a new call field. I could have created it directly from here, said create call field for report. Now one thing to remember. Whenever we are creating these conditions, right, we would always create them on this business object. Based on the field or the source field that we select here, Workday would automatically default the related business object. What is this defaulted based on? If you go to the source field, if you see this identifies the organizations that the worker is related to. This field actually links the worker business object, which is my primary business object, with the organization business object. Based on the related business object on your source field, Workday automatically defaults it here. Now your call field that you create or your condition that you create has to be on this field, not on your primary business object. If you see all the fields that it is showing right now, if I go to all of these fields are associated with organization business object. Even this call field, which already I selected, it's on the organization business object. Whenever we are building a condition, either it's for ESI single instance or EMI extract multiple instances, the condition has to be on the related business object. That is defaulted. This time my business object is organization. Right? This is a call field of type true, false. The output of a true, false condition is either true or false. Right? I'm saying CFTF. It is built on organization. And let's say we're saying is company. Now a true-false condition is similar to a filter. A filter evaluates a report filter and it gives you either true or false. Based on that, your output works right. A true-false condition is exactly similar. You're evaluating some criteria. Let's see what values are available. I want only those organizations of the employee which are of type company. An employee is associated with multiple organizations, company, cost, center region, on and forth, and everything displays here. I only want those organizations which are of type company. My condition is type equal company, and here I see all the different organization types that are available in Workday. And I'll say company. I could have selected any other organization type as well. And I'm saying I'll copy this, coming here. So Right, Workday would check this multi-instance field. See all instances that are associated with the worker. See if a given instance satisfies this condition. Only if an organization is of type company, which is our condition. Then this calculation returns true. And that is included in single instance. Now here a worker can only have one company assigned, right? We know this field or this condition will always return one instance. But in some cases, a field based on your condition may return multiple instances. Right, ultimately, your field can only show one of those instances because this is single instance field. If your condition returns multiple instances, which of those instances do you want to be selected? Let's say you're checking the business process history of the worker. A worker can have undergone multiple business processes. Hire, compensation change, transfer, and on and forth. Now we want to select the last transfer of the employee. Right, an employee could have been transferred multiple times. 5 times, 1 time, 0 time, 10 times. Based on your condition would be get all business processes which are associated with transfer. And now system returns all the transfers for the worker. What you need is the latest transfer. Then you'll say the effect through the sort field, sort all the instances based on when that transfer happened, right? You'll search for effective date. You'll search for effective date and say sort all the returned instances based on their effective date in descending order and then pick the first occurrence. This will give you the latest transfer of the employee. Right, in the case of ESI, in addition to the condition, you have some additional fields as well. This allows you to pick a specific instance if your condition returns multiple instances. Because if you don't do that, Workday would show any one random instance based on the condition. Right now, in our case, that is not relevant. We know that a worker can only have one company assignment. I cannot assign a worker to multiple companies. I don't need this. All I'll do is I'll select a dummy condition, which is history. This is a Workday delivered field. It always returns to. Right, I know, because this condition will only return me one instance. I'm selecting. This sort field is true. And again, it doesn't matter whether I select ascending or descending. In my case, I know I'll only have one instance. When you're creating this call field, always consider, for example, let's say this one. If I create a call field to get international assignments of the employee and I only want the latest international assignment. Right now, in this case, if you see, this worker has 3 international assignments. If I create an ESI for this workday, would randomly pick any one of these and show me, because ultimately it can only show one as part of an ESA. I would then sort it based on when the international assignment was effective. Maybe I want the last one or first one. And then I'll say, get me the last one or a specific one. I can say, get me the first occurrence, last occurrence, or maybe I want the second one or third one. I'll specify the occurrence. Let's edit our report now. I think it's already edited. Sorry. It's already added. ESI worker organizations. Right now, it's only giving me one instance, and in every instance, if you see, it is returning me company. GMS UA is the company. Right out of all the instances, this worker belongs to GMS Canada. It returns to GMS Canada. Any question? These are the calculated fields of type instance. Alright, I think we have covered a lot of calculated fields for one day. There are a few others that I'll cover tomorrow and a few more that I'll cover as part of the matrix reports. Right, not cover any new cal fields for today. Let's take a slightly lighter topic for the rest 30 minutes. We'll talk about dashboards. Right now, if you remember, let me show you. What we can do is, once we have created our reports, we can group multiple reports together to create a dashboard. For example, if I click on this dashboard, it is a combination of reports. Related reports, of course, that's what we would do. We would want to group related reports together and present them to the user. When I run it, you see all my reports execute. And they give me data instead of showing just one report. What we can do is we can group multiple reports together with the help of a dashboard. Now there are a lot of Workday delivered dashboards, right? But we can also create our own custom dashboards. Now this report I can add to a Workday delivered dashboard as well. But we'll see how a custom dashboard is created, and it is very simple. But this point in time, in order to add this report to a dashboard, I'll have to enable it as a worklet. What is a worklet? A worklet is a report that can be added to a dashboard, a landing page. I'll go ahead and edit. I'll click on Output and there is this Worklet options. I'll enable this report as a worklet. The moment I do that, for the default saying that this worklet would be available on the home dashboard. Now what is home dashboard? Basically here, this is my home landing page, right? It is, if you see, someone has added a report here. The reason they could add this report directly to the home page is because home page is also a dashboard. The moment I enable a report as a worklet, system says we are defaulting this worklet for the home dashboard. You can go ahead and add it here, but that's not what I want. I don't want this report to be available directly on the home dashboard. Then I can come in here and select any of the other available dashboards. Again, people have created a lot of junk dashboards, but if you see, I can also select worklet delivered dashboards. Right, I can select any of the custom dashboards, delivered dashboards, and enable my report for those dashboards. Now before enabling, and my reports can be enabled for one or multiple dashboards. Before enabling our reports for a dashboard, let's go ahead and create a dashboard. Right, the task is create dashboard. I want to create a new dashboard and I'm calling it KP Manji 1. Alright, this takes me to the next screen. Here I can select the dashboard icon. If I go back, each of these dashboards, if you see, is associated with an icon. Right? I can decide what icon should display, and these are all workload delivered. Based on my requirement, I would select an icon. This the reports on this dashboard are related to employee. I'm selecting this icon. Right. The next thing I'll have to say who can access this dashboard. Now, I believe you would have already spoken about security in your sessions last week as part of HCM. In Workday, all security is controlled by a domain. If you have access to a domain, you can access all objects which are part of that domain. I'll include this dashboard within a domain. I'm saying this is part of, let's say, worker data. I'm not speaking about security now because that's not really part of report. It is security impacts your reporting, but for now, we are just using the existing security framework. I'll not talk about that in detail. Now, a dashboard can show a maximum of 6 worklets. Maximum of 6 reports can be shown on your dashboard, not more than that. The max is 6, the defaulted is 6. If let's say I don't want to see 6 on this particular dashboard, I only want 3. I can specify a lesser number, but I cannot go beyond 6 because the maximum is 6. I can give some description if I want to. I'll leave this as is and say, right, and this is the icon for employee. Now my dashboard is ready. I can go back and search for my dashboard. I'm saying this particular worklet, it would be available on this dashboard key PMG1. I can create more reports and I can add them to this dashboard if I want to. At present, we just have 1 to 4. And I'll say at this point in time, all we have done is we have created a dashboard. We have created a report and we have said this report can be added to this dashboard. But we have not yet added it. We have just said this report is enabled for this dashboard. That's all we are saying. That's all we have configured till now. Next task is to actually go ahead and configure the dashboard that we have created. The task for that is maintain dashboards. This shows all the dashboards in the tenant. It shows me all the dashboards, whether they are custom dashboards or they are Workday delivered dashboards. Workday delivered dashboards cannot be deleted. If I have access to it, I can run that dashboard. But as a report admin, I can always edit any of the dashboards. For Workday delivered, I would take it on. The custom dashboards can be deleted. I would and deleted. It has a dependent configuration. That's fine. But ultimately, I can go in and delete it once I have cleaned up the associated apps. Alright, I want to search for my dashboard. That's what I am interested in. I'm saying Kimjeet. I can run it. It doesn't have any reports configured, it will give me blank at this point in time. I can delete it. I can edit it. Click on Edit. Currently, there is no content. I can click on Settings. This is those initial settings that I configured. I can edit it, change the name, change the domain. I can still go out and make those changes. I'm going to Content. I'm adding a new content in a single tab. You remember the error I got when I was deleting the dashboard. It said there are more tabs on the dashboard. Dashboard can have multiple tabs. Each tab can have a single up to 6 reports. I'm creating a new tab. Let's call it Tab 1. I can give it some name, and each tab can have maximum of 6 workloads. Expand the workload section. Click on plus. And when I go in here, I'll click on all. There are 2 criteria for your enabling the report on your dashboard. The report should be shared with someone, and I'm still concerned. This is actually a temporary report. I don't know if we can add it to a dashboard or not. In your test tenants, when you create a report, Workday automatically creates it as a temporary report, and then it deletes it after X number of days. You will see this report will be deleted on 12th or December 4th. Maybe Workday would not allow us, but one of the prerequisites for adding a report to a dashboard is that it should be shared. I'm saying shared it with, let's say, HR administrator, HR analyst, HR auditor, HR integration administrator, and on and forth. Now let's see. Now our report is available. Only one report is available. The reason is we have only enabled one report. This dashboard, at this point in time, no other reports are available on this dashboard. Right? We have to make the report available and then we can add them. But the moment I do that, all the security groups that the report is shared with, they get defaulted. I shared this report with 4 security groups, or probably 5. They are all defaulted. At this point in time, I can either select or keep all those security groups, or I can say no on the dashboard. I don't want this report to be available to, let's say, HR analyst. I can still go ahead and do that. I can give it a different title. By default, it will show this name. I can say no on the dashboard. It should just say worker details. And I can go ahead and save it. I think it will not allow me to save because, as I mentioned, this is a temporary report. But we don't have an option to change that because Workday is automatically. This is marked as a temporary report. Let's see if I can uncheck that box. I don't think we have that option or that authorization in this tenant. Even when you create your reports in your implementation tenant, you can enable those reports as temporary. Because maybe you're testing something. When you enable a report as a temporary, they would automatically be deleted as part of that report run. Here, I don't have that authorization. If you have the access, you can check this. We don't have that access here. But anyway, at this point in time, you can go ahead and save it. You can add more dashboards, more worklets if they are all enabled. And then you can go ahead and save it, and then your worklets are available as part of your dashboard. Right? There are some options available. You can resize them. And the other option is to when you say 2x, it shows you on a bigger window. For example, if I go to Talent Management Dashboard, this is once. If you do Tool X, then one report shows on this whole page. Let's do one thing, because we cannot save this. Obviously, we'll go ahead and edit the talent management dashboard and see what options are available there. Because this is a Workday delivered dashboard, I cannot delete it. I have the authorization to run it. That's why I was able to run it here as well, and I can directly run it from here. It will give me the exact same layout. If I click on Edit, let's see. My team's talent summary. This is the second report which has been added, and it has been relabeled. This is how you add worklets. You mark certain worklets as required or optional. We'll see what happens when a worklet is marked as required or optional. And then you specify the size. And if you want, you can specify a different title as well. Now, in addition to this, if you want, you can also add some menu items. For example, I'm creating a new menu item. Currently, this is how this looks. I only have 6 reports. I can come in here. I can add any extra reports. Or, for example, I'm coming here and I'm creating a new task, and the task is Create Supervisory. This is I'm giving them quick links directly from here. I'm adding a new task under this. I'll come to task, create custom allowed worklet tasks. I am saying assess my team's potential. I'm adding a couple of tasks. I can give it a name. I can add some comments. On and forth. Now, if I go back to the menu, rerun this dashboard. If you see those two tasks, those two options are enabled. These are like those quick action tasks that I'm integrating within my dashboard. My dashboard would still run. It will give me all or show the output for all 6 worklets that I've added or fewer. But then I have also added this menu. This is the menu label that I created. If I can go back, this is that label report that you see here. And within this, I have added a couple of tasks. I could have integrated some report as well, some standard reports, any other custom reports. The difference here and here is when I add a report here, a worklet here, that report actually runs and gives me the output. Right? Instead of running that report, because we can add a maximum of only 6 here, and maybe I want to add some other report as well. I can come in here and I can directly add. If you see, I can add link to a specific report as well instead of running it. Similarly, I can add a link to a task. Dashboards are very simple, very straightforward. They are only a means to group related worklets and related information. Now when I come here, if I click, if you see, I have an option to edit my home page menu. I can order, right? I can sort my data, but I can also add some additional apps. I can also edit the layout. When I edit, if you see some of these worklets or dashboards, I don't have an option to remove them. Learning I cannot remove, talent and performance I cannot remove, but this dashboard I can actually remove. Again, there's some dashboard called absolute that I can remove. Some of these dashboards or worklets are available for being removed, others are not. Now, this is determined by the required checkbox that you would have selected. If on a dashboard a worklet is required, then it cannot be removed. Now we have configured this talent management as a dashboard. Next, what we have actually done is we have added this dashboard once again to the home dashboard. It was everything that you see here. If you remember, we said this is also a dashboard, your home page. Workday has delivered this dashboard called home. Now when I go there, out of this 530 dashboards, I can now come in here, edit my home dashboard and say which of my other reports or dashboards will be available on my home dashboard. If I expand the worklet, that's why you see some of the dashboards on your home page, not everything. Also, you see some of the reports on your home page. If you see birthdays, for example, talent management dashboard. Now I cannot go ahead and remove talent management dashboard. Where is it? There's no option to remove it, whereas birthdays can be removed. The reason is on your home page, talent management dashboard is marked as required, whereas birthdays are marked as optional. Similarly, that prior staffing details and report. This is some report that they have directly added to the home page. You remember how do we do that? We come here, we enable our report as a worklet. And then, for example, I can directly add this or make this report available for my home dash. And then that can be directly selected on here. That's what this report has been done. I want to mark this as optional, or maybe I want to delete it completely, and I can do that. This is how you configure your dashboards, your reports, and then make them available on your home page or your home dashboard. Because these are optional, I can come in here. I can say edit and exit. Now that prior is actually. Is it saved now? If you want to save it, you can do that. If we refresh it, this would be removed as well. Because we have removed prior completely or that report completely, any optional worklets can be added, can be removed. Required worklets cannot be removed, cannot be added. I can save my changes. While on other dashboards, a maximum of 6 worklets can be displayed, on your home page, a maximum of 20 worklets can be displayed. Any questions? Alright, let me show you just one last thing. We said on your dashboard, the maximum of 6 worklets can be displayed. A workaround for it is you can add multiple tabs. On a single tab, you can show 6 worklets. But what you can do is you can add additional tabs. I can come in here. This is my default tab, which is what shows, right? But then I can add a new tab. I can say this is 2, and in this tab I can still add more worklets, right? Each tab I can add a maximum of 6. If I refresh now, I've not added any reports to the second tab. I just want to show you. My tab 2 doesn't have any reports. That's why it shows me blank. I could have again added up to 6 tabs there or 6 worklets there. My tab 1 has 6 worklets. Go back. I can come in here, add worklets to this tab 2, or I can reorder it. I want tab 2 to come second. I can click here, add 6 worklets. I can decide, saying this should be 2x. Go back. This is. I think we can reorder it. I think the reorder thing was not saved. But wait, it's not saved. This has 2, this has 6. Reorder. Right? This has been reordered. Please do like, share, and subscribe to our channel. For more information, contact us sales@therightuptalk.com.